In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, August 29th, financial aid will be offered to flood-hit small businesses while the government taps into its reserves to keep the market supplied with food products ahead of the Chuseok holiday to keep prices in check. And the ruling People Power Party returns to an acting chair management under floor leader Kweon Seong-dong, while the opposition Democratic Party of Korea elects Lee Jae-myung as its new leader. Quite a number of categories of the 2022 MTV Video Music Awards have at least one K-pop representatives, with BTS enjoying the most mentions. For now, BLACKPINK has won some titles. We start at the presidential office, where President Yoon has pledged to keep prices in check ahead of the Chuseok holiday as part of efforts to stabilize the public cost of living. Addressing members of the media on his way to work earlier on this Monday, Yoon claimed authorities are working to ensure the prices of popular Chuseok food products remain at levels similar to those of last year. He also shared intentions to ensure the disaster relief funds for those hard hit by the recent record rainfall are being distributed before the start of the Chuseok holiday, which begins next Friday this year. The president added that no money will be spared with regard to assisting those in need and investing in future growth. On a separate note, he also urged for constructive cooperation between the government and the opposition party. On the trade front, relevant officials here are headed for the U.S. to convey Seoul's concerns over Washington's newly adopted Inflation Reduction Act. Now, the act excludes electric vehicles that would be assembled outside of North America from tax incentives, effectively cutting off all subsidies for South Korean car makers. During their three-day visit to Washington, D.C., officials from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Finance will meet with their U.S. counterparts to address the issue and also discuss countermeasures with Korean car makers and battery producers located there in the U.S. Meanwhile, Trade Minister An Deok-keun will continue high-level talks on the matter during his trip to Washington next week. On the diplomatic front, Foreign Minister Park Jin is meeting with his Mongolian counterpart, Batchechek, on this Monday. A host of bilateral and regional issues are on the agenda, including supply chains, as Seoul seeks to diversify its sources of imports, and Pyongyang's provocations as efforts continue to ensure broader peace and prosperity. Later on this Monday afternoon, Park is scheduled to pay a courtesy call on the Mongolian president before departing for Seoul on Tuesday. Park's three-day visit to Mongolia is the first trip there by a top South Korean diplomat since the year 2014. On the local political front, the ruling People Power Party is returning to an acting chair management under floor leader Kweon Seong-dong amid fresh leadership turmoil following last Friday's court ruling against the party's claim of an emergency situation warranting a transition in power. Political correspondent Lee Jae-myung explains.
Following the suspension of its interim leader, the ruling People Power Party is gearing up to relaunch its emergency leadership before the nation's Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday that starts next Friday. Until then, the party will be led by its full leader Kweon Seong-dong. Kweon will serve as what the party calls acting interim leader, despite growing calls for his resignation as full leader over his responsibility for mishandling the party.
There are certain tasks that I need to carry out in order to proceed with the launching of a new leadership. The priority is resolving the current crisis.
And among Kweon's responsibilities will be requesting the convening of national committees that have ultimate right to approve decisions, such as the appointment of an interim leader. Along with Kweon, all of the emergency committee members, except for its head Joo Oh-young, will remain in their positions. The party said it's the only viable option to proceed with its plan.
The current emergency committee members will not resign in order to preserve the last remaining body with decision-making rights.
The latest move comes in response to a court decision on Friday that partially ruled in favor of ex-chairman Lee Jae-myung, who filed for injunction and suspended the duties of its interim leader Joo Oh-young. It cited lack of legitimacy of the party's emergency system, saying the party technically is not qualified to launch such a system under its own charter. In order to avoid any legal attacks this time, the first thing the party will do is to revise its charter to expand the scope of requirements to cover its current situation. The plan is to sort out the details of the revisions as early as Tuesday. But all eyes are on whether the party can take the next step from there, as the National Committee chair has objected to convening any meetings, citing concerns of another failure. 이경은, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea has voted in a new management. Former presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung has taken the helm of the party with a landslide victory. Here's our related correspondent, Kim Bo-kyung.
The main opposition Democratic Party of Korea has chosen its new leaders. The positions had been left vacant since March after the party lost the presidential election, with the party being led by an emergency committee. In the final rounds of voting, which took place on Sunday at the KSPO Dome in Seoul's Songpa-gu district, the party elected former presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung to take the helm of the party, beginning his 2-year term as chairperson. After losing to Yoon in the presidential election in March, Lee had bounced back as a member of National Assembly, winning the by-election for Incheon's Gaeang B district in June's local elections. The tally included votes by party members who paid party dues, which were weighted to account for 40%, as well as votes by party delegates, the results of opinion surveys, and votes by ordinary party members, which were worth 30%, 25%, and 5% each. Lee Jae-myung won a landslide victory for the party leader position, securing 77.77% of the accumulated total votes, followed by Park Yong-jin, who took a little over 22%. This is the record win for the post of party leader, beating the previous record of 60.77 in 2020, earned by former chair Lee Na-kyun. During his acceptance speech, Lee underlined unity within the party and showed the will to build a whole new Democratic Party of Korea, while stressing that he would consider people's livelihoods as the top priority.
If it will bring people's livelihoods just one step forward, I will be the first one to actively cooperate with the government and the ruling party. I will ask for talks with President Yoon Song-yeol himself and come up with a solution. If they are taking the right path for the public, I will assist the government and the ruling party with all my efforts. But if they damage people's livelihoods, the economy, the value of democracy and peace, or show regressive steps by turning back history and ruling alone, I will fight against it.
5 Spring Council members, Jung Cheong-rae, Go Min-jung, Park Chan-dae, Seo-young-gyu, and Jang Kyung-tae, have also been elected.
With the launch of the new leadership under former presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung, eyes are on what the party will do to recover from its recent election losses and get ready for the general election scheduled in 2024. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In Ukraine, concerns over a potential nuclear disaster are mounting as shelling continues on the grounds of the country's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Our Lee Si-hoo has the latest.
There have been more reports of shelling around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, fueling international concerns that the fighting could trigger a nuclear disaster. According to Ukrainian officials on Sunday, Russian forces shelled towns near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest of its kind in Europe, overnight. Ukraine's governor for the Zaporizhzhia region, Alexander Staruk, said on Telegram on Sunday that Russian forces had struck residential buildings about a 2-hour drive from the plant and the town of Orikhiv further east. On the other hand, according to Reuters' report, Russia on Sunday claimed that the plant had been shelled by Ukraine over the past 24 hours. However, Ukraine's state-run nuclear company N.KOREA'S said it had no new information about any attacks on the plant. This comes just a day after Moscow and Kyiv traded accusations of shelling around the nuclear plant. Ukraine's N.KOREA'S said on Saturday that Russian troops had shelled the grounds of the plant complex in the last 24 hours. The same day, Moscow's defense ministry accused Ukrainian forces of shelling the plant complex 3 times in the last 24 hours. Reuters said it could not verify such battlefield reports. Amid the accusations, the U.S. State Department said in a statement on Sunday that Russia did not want to acknowledge the grave radiological risk at the Zaporizhzhia plant. It added that this was the reason it blocked a final draft of a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Previously on Friday, Russia had blocked an agreement on the final draft of a review of the UN treaty considered the cornerstone of nuclear disarmament over criticism of Russia's actions in Ukraine. Meanwhile, according to Ukraine's regional governor for Zaporizhzhia, residents were being taught how to use iodine in case of a radiation leak. Reuters also reported that Zaporizhzhia authorities handed out iodine tablets to its residents on Friday. Iodine tablets are known to help block the absorption of radioactive iodine by the thyroid gland in a nuclear disaster. 이시후, Arirang News.
Right, and that ends part 1 of the Daily Report. We return with part 2 in a few minutes. Stay with us.
What matters?
Welcome back. South Korea and the US have resumed their large-scale military training after a 4-year halt. For more on the ongoing ULCHI Freedom Shield amid tensions on the Korean Peninsula, I have Dr. Bruce Burnett from RAND Corporation live here in the studio. Of course, Dr. Burnett, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
I also have Professor Kim Jae-chun at Sogang University joining our session virtually. Professor Kim, it's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Dr. Burnett, we'll start here then. North Korea has yet to specifically respond to this particular ongoing military drill, but based on its remarks, prior remarks that is, what can you deduce perhaps about Pyongyang's current sentiment with regard to the ULCHI Freedom Shield?
Well, I have to imagine that Kim Jong-un is scared to death
When we think of North Korea attacking South Korea, we usually assume that will come out of an exercise when its troops are most prepared and most ready to act against the South. And so for Kim, he's got to be mirror imaging us and thinking, oh, well, then U.S. is going to try to do the same kind of thing. So I think he's scared. I think he's angry. He does not like it. He has tried to stop the exercises many, many times. And I think he's also hoping that he can use this with his people to convince them that the U.S. is really an enemy and they've got to be prepared to sacrifice to deal with the United States and with South Korea, and that we don't really want good things for his people. So those give us also then opportunities to identify things we could be doing to counter his responses.
Right. Professor Kim, now this is the first large-scale military training since the Yoon administration took office back in May. How does this compare to previous drills under former administrations?
Well, during the Moon Jae-in's presidency, large-scale military exercises, joint military exercises between ROC and the U.S. had been virtually all suspended. Key Resolve, Fall Eagle, and ULCHI Freedom Guardian, they had been all suspended or downsized to the extent that we couldn't even call them real exercises. You know, President Moon wanted to expedite what he called a Korean Peninsula peace process, you know, all these inter-Korean communications and economic cooperation, and North Korea sort of presented suspension of these exercises as a precondition for inter-Korean dialogue. And not only Moon, but American President, former, of course, Trump, wanted to cancel these exercises because he wanted to negotiate with Kim Jong-un, and also he complained about the costs, you know, that these exercises are too costly. So it was the agreement between the U.S. and South Korea to scrap these big-time military exercises, and now it's complete reversal from the previous administrations, and not just in South Korea, in both countries, because current administrations in both countries sort of agreed to resume all these joint military drills, and that included Key Resolve, Fall Eagle, and ULCHI Freedom Guardian, and the exercise that we just had in past several days was ULCHI Freedom Shield, as you said, formerly ULCHI Freedom Guardian. And I think what really separates this exercise from the exercises in the previous administration is the sheer size of it. You know, ULCHI Freedom Shield was a large-scale exercise that included field training, you know, field exercises, which didn't really take place during the previous administration.
Right. Dr. Bennett, President Yoon Suk-yeol has also called for the strengthening of the three-axis system. Do you care to elaborate?
Oh, absolutely. So starting after the North Korean second nuclear test, South Korea became concerned that they couldn't just ignore North Korea having nuclear weapons. They needed to prepare procedures to respond to it. They had missile defense that they had been building already, but they have gone on to augment that and build it significantly. But they also recognized that missile defense is imperfect. It can leak, it can be overwhelmed, and so a key they recognized was that they also needed a kill chain kind of capability, a capability to destroy the attackers before they launch. Now, most people will say, oh no, that's destabilizing, because then you have to preempt them. It doesn't work that way. North Korea has always built many missiles for every launcher. And so after they launched their first missile, there are still hundreds of missiles out there sitting in underground facilities that the U.S. and South Korea could be destroying if we've got the capability, if we know where, and if we have the capability to destroy them. Then, after the fourth nuclear test and the fifth nuclear test, South Korea said, we have to recognize that deterrence is important. And that led to the Korean massive punishment and retaliation. The only thing Kim Jong-un really cares about is himself. That's what he's concerned about. And so that was a way of threatening him and telling him, if you execute an attack on South Korea, you won't survive it. And the U.S. has mirrored that in our discussion. If you use a nuclear weapon, you will not survive it, Kim Jong-un.
Right, I see a stern warning right there. Professor Kim, meanwhile, there has been talk about North Korea planning to modernize its fleet of Air Force fighters with those from Russia. What more can you tell us?
I think it's not just Russia that is trying to modernize North Korea's Air Force fighters. I think China is also trying to modernize North Korea's Air Force, which is in sort of decrepit condition. So we can say that Russia and China are sort of vying with each other to upgrade and modernize North Korea's Air Force. I can't really say it for sure, but in my opinion, Russia is a little ahead of China in this endeavor because Russia has this, signature jet fighter, MiG, MiG-35. But one downside of MiG is that it's a little bit pricey. It's a little expensive, and Chinese-developed fighters are a little cheaper. Anyways, North Korea is expected to modernize its fleet of Air Force fighters on a major scale. Why? It's a part of their 5-year weapons modernization plan, the plan that Kim Jong-un announced a couple of years ago. And Russia then has taken an interest in North Korean plans. Maybe it's a way of Russia to get back at the United States, the United States that has been frustrating Russian war efforts in Ukraine.
Right, I see. And Dr. Bennett, generally speaking, what are North Korea's military capabilities?
Well, they have a very large military. That's important when you compare it to how small South Korea's military is getting. But they're not very high technology, as Dr. Kim has said. So what we have to then look at is say, let's go back to 1980. Kim Il-sung knew what was happening. He knew there was no way he could compete with the technology that South Korea and the U.S. could field. So what did he do? He decided to start building weapons of mass destruction. He builds nuclear capabilities, he builds chemical and biological weapons, and he's built capabilities that will offset his negative capabilities on a conventional side to overcome the South. The problem is it took decades for all of that to develop, but now it's there. And we have to recognize that he's not going to fight a conventional war. He knows that if he invades South Korea with conventional capabilities only, he will lose. And so he is thinking about using those capabilities if he ever goes to war. And that's worrisome because it's not clear we're really ready for nuclear weapon use, chemical use, biological weapon use. We plan to talk about that tomorrow when we release our latest report on that.
Right, which is why you're here in South Korea.
Exactly.
And staying with North Korea's capabilities, Professor Kim, some say North Korea's cyber war capabilities currently pose more of an immediate threat than its military programs. How do you explain this reality?
It's a little bit ironic, isn't it? I mean, because North Korea is probably one of the most impoverished countries in the world, and its infrastructure of technological development is falling way behind. And these conditions don't seem to allow North Korea to possess the kind of cyber warfare capabilities to pose major threats to the Korean Peninsula. Yet North Korea's cyber capabilities are a major security threat to the Korean Peninsula. I think it has to do with a number of factors. First, North Korean regime has put in real efforts to train these world-class hackers. So these hackers are really good. And second, it's the nature of cyberspace or cyber war, if you will. What I mean by this is that attackers in cyberspace always enjoy a considerable degree of anonymity. It's very difficult to trace these attackers. So in cyberspace, the offense has the upper hand. So for North Korea, strengthening these cyber capability is a very cost-efficient means to sort of counterbalance the growing gap in conventional military capabilities between the two Koreas. And now they could launch malicious software attacks, malware attacks, online bank heists, hacking attacks, you name them. So it could really disrupt the stability and peace on the Korean Peninsula. and actually maybe beyond the Korean Peninsula. That's my assessment.
Right. And staying with that, Dr. Burnett, I understand this will be a tough question, but how can South Korea and the U.S. seek to better respond to these threats by North Korea?
Well, I think we have to recognize that if the growing threats that are problematic to us are things like nuclear weapons and chemical and biological, the U.S. has tried to go to North Korea and negotiate these things away. But Kim isn't only refusing to negotiate, he's building more and more. So we're at a stage where we have to take these seriously. At the end of the Cold War in 1990, roughly, we turned our attention to terrorism. We paid attention to these lower-level kinds of threats. Now it's time for our two countries to get back to worrying about weapons of mass destruction, about nuclear weapons, and how you defend against them. And there are ways that can be very effective. But we have to be prepared to make some significant investments, and we have to do the planning of how you make it all work. We have to then convince Kim that he cannot succeed if this is what he does.
Right. Professor Kim, the Yoon administration's latest proposal of an audacious economic development plan for North Korea was crudely condemned by Kim Yo-jong, while her brother Kim Jong-un remained mute. What are your thoughts on these roles by the two siblings and their broader implications, perhaps?
Well, it seems that there is a division of role between these two siblings. Kim Jong-un is using more refined language, and then he's trying to look like a more calm and restrained leader, whereas his younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, is using all these foul language, and she doesn't really have any qualms about calling names. So in a way, there is a, I don't know, good cop, bad cop division of role here. But for about 2 weeks ago, if my memory serves me correct here, Kim Jong-un, during this speech, did single out Yoon Suk-yeol, President Yoon Suk-yeol. Actually, he didn't say President Yoon Suk-yeol. He just said Yoon Suk-yeol, and Yoon Suk-yeol is a military thug, and Yoon Suk-yeol is going to pay for what he's been doing and what he has been saying. So good cop, bad cop role division is not that proper anymore. I don't know, but what has attracted my attention more is how Kim Yo-jong, this female in this very, very male chauvinistic society, now has become probably the second powerful person in North Korea. The way she has been wielding political power is quite amazing, and that there is a very little doubt that Kim Jong-un trusts his sister very much. So if something happens to Kim Jong-un, I don't know, if Kim Jong-un dies all of a sudden, I think Kim Yo-jong is there to succeed his brother, although it's not going to be that easy.
Right. Dr. Burnett, moving forward, the new UN expert on human rights in North Korea is here in South Korea starting on this Monday, that is. What on her agenda looks to be of interest given the status quo? We're talking about Elizabeth Salmon.
Well, I think we have to recognize that North Korea doesn't want to hear anything about human rights because that's damaging to the regime. I mean, even their elites know that they could be dead tomorrow. And they could be abused. They could be sent off to a prison camp. So this is something which they want to submerge, not have be in the news, not have international attention. The fact that the UN person is coming to Korea is great because it gives us a chance to highlight the fact that this is an important part of what being a reasonable and acceptable country is, that we honor human rights. And so I think she's here to do that. But it also gives us an interesting lever on Kim Jong-un because it allows us to say, you want to do these provocations, missile launches, nuclear tests, there are things we could do that you will really hate, like raise your human rights record very actively in the media if you continue. And that gives us an opportunity to say that. I hope our two governments do that.
Right. Professor Kim, government officials here and over in the US have been claiming that North Korea is close to conducting a 7th nuclear test. Do you share this outlook? And if so, what countermeasures do you propose?
I think all the evidence suggests that North Korea is technically ready, technically prepared to conduct a nuclear weapons test for the 7th time. So if they decide, if they make up their mind, I think they can do it anytime they see fit. But I think there are two lingering questions, at least in my personal opinion. I think there are two questions that might be lingering in the minds of Kim Jong-un. First, what are they going to prove this time? You know, what do they really want to accomplish? Because they have already proved that they had credible hydrogen bomb capabilities, you know, strategic nuclear weapons capabilities. So if there's going to be another nuclear test, what are they going to prove? They have to prove something different this time. It has to be about, I think, their tactical nuclear weapons capabilities, you know, small nuclear weapons with smaller nuclear warheads with lower yield and less nuclear fallout. But the question is, are they really ready for this? So that's my first question. And second, if they conduct another nuclear weapons test, I think it could raise many eyebrows in China and also possibly Russia. Sure, Chinese and Russians, they basically gave a go sign to a series of North Korea's missiles testings this year, but another nuclear weapons test, I think it's a very different matter here. And about a month ago, Chinese ambassador to the United Nations clearly said that China is opposed to North Korea's nuclear weapons testing for the 7th time. Sure, China, also Russia, they want to confront the United States on the Korean Peninsula, but that said, nuclear weapons testing is going to be maybe too much of a destabilizing factor both to Chinese and Russians. So I'm not really sure whether North Korea will go ahead and conduct nuclear weapons testing for the 7th time. You also asked me how we could cope with the North Korea's nuclear provocation. I think we don't really have any option but to stay united and keep sending this message, keep imparting this message to North Koreans that if there is going to be another nuclear weapons test, there's going to be very, very heavy price that you guys will have to pay.
Right, as Dr. Bennett said, the consequences will be quite tough this time.
Yes.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Dr. Bennett here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
NASA's hopes of advancing man's exploration of the moon and ultimately Mars are taking tangible form on this Monday with the launch of Part 1 of its Artemis program. Our Lee Jae-myung has details.
Despite concerns over weather conditions at Cape Canaveral, Florida, it looks like Mother Nature is on NASA's side as Artemis I is set for launch on Monday.
Bottom line is we look really good. No issues, no concerns or constraints from the lightning events at this point. Let's see.
Artemis I marks the first test flight of NASA's Space Launch System, Moon Rocket, and its Orion spacecraft. The unmanned mission will send a sensor-laden Orion capsule on a 42-day shakedown cruise around the moon to verify that both vehicles are ready to fly astronauts into deep space. Aboard the Orion capsule will be 3 mannequins that will imitate real astronauts with human-like tissues, bones, and organs. The capsule will also be equipped with 5,600 sensors and 34 radiation detectors to measure the impact of travel on the crew. The Artemis program consists of 3 phases. Monday's first phase will be followed by Artemis II, where NASA will launch 4 astronauts around the moon in 2024. Following that mission will be Artemis III, the program's first crewed lunar landing in 2025. South Korea's first lunar orbiter Danuri, launched earlier this month, included a shadow cam, which will help find an appropriate landing spot for the Artemis III mission. Artemis I will launch at 8:33 a.m. Monday Eastern Standard Time or 9:33 p.m. Korea Standard Time. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, BTS and BLACKPINK were among the winners at the 2022 MTV Video Music Awards over in New Jersey on Sunday night, local time. BTS is bringing home the award for Group of the Year in a category that boasted BLACKPINK, Måneskin and the Red Hot Chili Peppers among the nominees. BLACKPINK, for its part, won for Best Metaverse Performance for the group's virtual concert, which features in the mobile game Battlegrounds. The group also performed its newest single, Pink Venom, live at the event. Meanwhile, BLACKPINK member Lisa picked up the Best K-pop award for her debut solo single, La Lisa. Moreover, boy band 17 was a winner in the Push Performance of the Year category for the song Rock With You. On the health front, robots are now being employed to assist rehabilitation programs targeting patients following treatments. My colleague Yoon shows us how.
Rehabilitation doesn't happen overnight. It takes months and sometimes even years for someone with injuries or disabilities to be able to do everyday activities by themselves. But technology could help improve this grueling, labor-intensive process and make therapy more accessible and effective. Severance Rehabilitation Hospital is doing just that. They were the first hospital in the country to use robots as rehabilitation therapists.
Here at the Center for Robotic Rehabilitation, a range of robots are waiting for duty, like Andago, that helps patients walk. A therapist is always ready at hand and monitors the patient's conditions and controls the speed of the robot. Andago is also smart enough to prevent the patient from falling down.
There are also robots that help with upper limb training. Each provides different types of therapy depending on the injury. Armio Power has specifically been designed for patients who hardly have the strength to lift their own arms. Neo Mano is for those who have some strength in their wrists but cannot hold or release their grip. To boost the rehabilitation experience, augmented reality games are also at hand. Patients can look at the screen in front of them and try to complete challenges.
These types of exercises motivate me to finish my therapy for the day. I also think it's quite effective because I'm able to see how much progress I've made.
These robot assistants aren't just helping patients. They're also making life easier for therapists.
Before robots were used, it was up to the therapist to help patients with rehabilitation exercises like lifting their arms and legs repeatedly. This required a lot of physical strength and stamina. Now robots take care of this physically straining work. They excel in repetition and accuracy.
Severance Rehabilitation Hospital isn't the only place where robots act as assistants. Other hospitals around the country have been implementing robotic rehabilitation after realizing just how handy these digital assistants can be. Yoon, Arirang News.
Beauty care has become a popular at-home pampering routine born out of necessity amid the earlier pandemic restrictions and more recently the burden on purse strings. Our Arirang has more.
Beauty self-care has caught on fast over the last 3 years due to factors including social distancing, putting curbs on massages, and keeping customers out of beauty salons.
Getting beauty care at a salon is expensive for me as a student. That's why I buy self-massage products and use them at home.
I usually do nail and hair care by myself. I began doing it after COVID-19 started to spread rapidly.
Nail care products, self-massage tools, and even all kinds of makeup brushes. These are some of the many self-care beauty products that you can easily find in cosmetic store these days. One major health and beauty product company says sales of these items rose 35% on year in the first half of 2022.
The company said the biggest increase was seen in self-massage tools, with sales jumping more than 6 times compared to last year. It also added that sales of makeup brushes rose 46%, while other products like spatula that helps with more sophisticated makeup application also ranked in the top 5 most popular beauty products. And one mobile shopping app even rolled out a self-beauty product section earlier this year.
The company traced user search data to analyze what they looked for, and we found that self-care beauty products had the highest demand and decided to roll out specialized sections in the app. Self-waxing and self-eyelash perming products are the most popular items on the app these days.
The industry insider added that social distancing measures due to COVID-19 and the reasonable price of self-care products appear to be the two main drivers behind this trend. The increasing number of videos on social media in which influencers show their self-makeup tutorials are also a factor. One expert says this trend is likely to continue even as COVID-19 becomes endemic.
You can't say that the self-care trend is going to come to a stop in the endemic phase. Consumers are going to choose what's best for them. People are used to home care now, which means this is their routine and even something fun for them to try out.
She also added that as inflation rises, people will continue to look for ways to reduce their spending, which will eventually lead to the expansion of affordable self-care beauty. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
K-dramas have been raising greater awareness about the presence of those with disabilities in our communities and the real-life employment opportunities available to them. My colleague Song Yoo-jin has this report.
제 이름은 똑바로 읽어도 거꾸로 읽어도 우영우입니다. 기러기 토마토 스위스 인도인 별똥별 우영우.
The Korean drama Extraordinary Attorney Woo has become a sensation. It revolves around the life of the main character, Woo Young-woo, who has autism spectrum disorder. Then, what's made this drama so popular?
The character Woo Young-woo herself is very charming. She's not discouraged by her disability, but is rather very confident at what she does.
저도 발달 장애이고.
Before Woo Young-woo, there was the artist and actress Chung Eun-hae. She's the first Korean actress with Down syndrome in a drama series. Chung appeared in the drama Our Blues this year as the main character's sister, Young-hee. Woo and Chung both have disabilities. But the difference is that Chung is real while Woo is a fictional character. So when comparing Woo, who is a successful lawyer, to reality, there is a mismatch. Businesses in South Korea that have 50 or more employees are obligated to hire a certain number of disabled employees. But still, out of the 2.6 million disabled people in South Korea, only around 1/3 are employed. This is a so-called sheltered workshop for the disabled. People with disabilities can get job training and work here. But they only do simple, repetitive tasks such as making masks or packaging dishcloths. But people here are satisfied because before, they've never been given an opportunity to work regularly.
일하시는 게 좀 어떠세요? 일하는 게 재밌어요. 즐겁고. 어떤 면이 좀 즐겁고 재밌는 이렇게 여름 그러느라고 같이 일하고 같이 포장하고 같이 얘기하는 거. 그게 되게 즐거워요, 저한테는.
일을 하면서 돈을 벌 수 있고 그래서 좋습니다.
Most employees at this secondhand store also have developmental disabilities. They're also given tasks that might be boring or laborious, such as sorting out saleable products and polishing them. Still, the competition is fierce.
I remember that one mother volunteered at our center for years in order to help her child get a job here. Another family even moved to Daegu to apply for a position at the store there because they found it almost impossible to get into a branch in Seoul. Parents really want their children to work here as they want a place where their children can come every day and do productive work.
Then one question arises. Are people with disabilities only capable of doing simple, repetitive tasks? The answer is that it depends on the type of disability. Physically disabled people have a wider range of options. Judge Kim Dong-yeon, lawmakers Kim Ye-ji and Choi Hae-young proved this point. Kim Dong-yeon lost his eyesight due to a medical accident when he was in college. Kim Ye-ji was born blind due to retinitis pigmentosa, and Choi Hae-young was paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident. Yet their disabilities did not stop them from working in their chosen fields. This coffee shop is another example. There's a special way to order your coffee here. This is because here, people with and without disabilities work together. At this cafe, half of its 12 staff members have disabilities. But their disabilities do not serve as a problem when working.
Our staff get along with each other really well, regardless of whether they have disabilities or not. Just like this, we hope more non-disabled people will reach out to us and realize that we are not much different from them.
But this is not the case for those with intellectual impairments. There isn't enough infrastructure that helps these people become active, independent members of society. This is quite ironic because the number of intellectually disabled people is surpassing that of the physically disabled due to advancements in medical technology.
Those with intellectual disabilities have more difficulties in learning and adapting to new work. This wouldn't be a problem if companies have different positions for different types of disabilities. But because most of them tend to find someone who fits their standards, intellectually impaired people have very limited work they can do.
Then, what should be done to change the status quo? Change in perception through the media.
If more characters with disabilities appear in the media, it will naturally make the audience become familiar with the disabled and also foster a better understanding of them.
I can actually feel that the attitude of people around my daughter has changed after she appeared in Our Blues. Eunhae is the same, so I sometimes wonder what happened. A lot of parents whose children have disabilities also told me that people are now more welcoming than before.
In terms of us, the general public, we should regard disability as a trait, not a flaw. And what should we do when we encounter disabled colleagues at work? Experts say, rather than thinking about what we should be careful about, we should learn to go up to them and ask them directly of what they want and need.
본인이 정말 하고 싶어 하는 일이라면은 끝까지 포기하지 않고 도전을 하면은 언젠간 이루어질 수 있을까라고 생각합니다. 더 좋은 직장 가서 더 좋은 사람들하고 더 일하고 싶어서 일반 사람들하고 일하고 싶어서
저처럼 자신감 가지고 열심히 하면서 행복하게 살면서 돈도 벌고 사람들과 어울리고 하면 돼요.
송유진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Libya, new reports of clashes in the country have surfaced. According to Libya's health ministry, at least 32 people have been killed and 159 injured in fighting between rival Libyan forces. The conflict occurred Saturday local time in the capital city of Tripoli and saw an exchange of explosions and gunfire rattle the city's residential areas. This marks the largest escalation of violence in the country in 2 years. The clashes came as UN-recognized GNU government forces battled a militia that recognizes Fatih Bashagha as prime minister. Bashagha has the support of Libya's parliament and says the GNU's mandate is over as it failed to hold elections originally slated for December last year. The country has been in turmoil since the NATO-supported ousting of Libya's former leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. Unprecedented rain and flooding in Pakistan has left over 1,000 people dead over the last 2 months. That's according to officials on Sunday, who say that of the 1,033 victims, 348 were children, while a further 1,527 people were injured. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Minister for Climate Change added that 33 million people have been impacted by the prolonged disaster. While Pakistan normally receives 3 to 4 cycles of rain during the monsoon season, the minister says it is now receiving its 8th. Pakistan's foreign minister called on the international community for financial aid to deal with the economic fallout, saying the scale of destruction was hard to describe. The disaster comes as the country was already looking at high inflation and a depreciating currency, amongst other economic challenges. The streets of West London's Notting Hill were filled with thousands of people celebrating the return of its iconic carnival. The Notting Hill Carnival made its comeback over the weekend after being cancelled for the previous 2 years due to COVID-19. The event, which runs from Friday to Monday, is Europe's biggest carnival and celebrates African Caribbean culture. This year's event started with a 72-second silence in tribute to the 72 lives lost in the nearby Grenfell Tower fire in 2017. The tribute to those who died in the fire also included a run of the carnival's parade route by a running crew. The carnival's origins can be traced back to 1958, when Trinidadian human rights activist and journalist Claudia Jones unified a community hit by attacks against West Indians in the neighborhood. A baseball card has gone under the hammer for a record-breaking sum. The Mickey Mantle baseball card in mint condition was sold through Heritage Auctions on Sunday for $12.6 million. The sum is the highest figure ever paid for a sports collectible. It was the result of the card's near-perfect condition and because of Mickey Mantle's prominence in the baseball world. This comes as the sports collectibles market has seen a surge in transactions, with many seeing them as an alternative to investments in real estate or Wall Street. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Monday afternoon. I hope you brought your umbrella today. It's still raining slightly in the capital, and less than 1 millimeter of rain is expected in almost all regions. Although there won't be much, rain is going to continue until tonight, so keep your umbrellas at hand. Now that autumn is around the corner, it's getting cooler and breezier, reaching only 23 degrees in Seoul and 24 in Daejeon. That is 4 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday. Temperatures tend to swing at this time of year, so please dress accordingly so as not to catch a cold. And there's a nationwide rain in store tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. The rain will lash down in mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province with up to 100 millimeters of heavy rain, and other regions will also see 5 to 80 millimeters. Roads might be very slippery due to the rain, so please drive safely. And after the rain clouds move out of the country, late season high temperatures of around 30 degrees will continue temporarily for a few days. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That ends Monday's edition of the Daily Report. Thank you for watching. See you on Tuesday.